Okay, I got cut off there, but we're going to finish this section by doing this very last problem. So find all the zeros of this situation here. All right, hun, hun, hun. I look at it, the first thing I want to do is look for a GCF. I don't have one. I want to look to see if I can factor it in some way. Factor by grouping, nothing's coming to me. You guys know what we got to do. We have to do our P and Q, rational root theorem, P over Q rather. So we need to take all of the factors of 60 and all of the factors of 2, which are pretty easy, plus or minus 2 and plus or minus 1, and all of the factors of 60, which would be 60 and 1 and 30 and 2. You see how this is going to, let me just pause. Okay, I had to pause to get all the values out. Look at this. 60 has like all the factors in the world. I hope I got them all. And then we've got, how many factors is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 times 2 because it's the plus and minus, and then times 2 because we've got to divide all of these by 2. All right, let's see. Do we have to? Well, in a way, we've got plus or minus 60, and then 60 over 2 is 30, so that takes care of the 30 as well. So plus or minus 30, and 30 over 2 is 15, so that's there. Okay, that's kind of good. Plus or minus 20, and 20 over 2 is 10, and that's there. Plus or minus 15, but we don't have 15 over 2, which is, I know you're looking at me like, what? 15 over 2 is not represented here, so I need to add that. Plus or minus 12, but 12 over 2 is 6, so I'm cool. Plus or minus 10, and 10 over 2 is 5, so I'm cool. Plus or minus 6, 6 over 2 is 3. Plus or minus 5 is cool, but 5 over 2 is not represented in our current set. Plus or minus 4, 2 is represented, so I don't have to do 4 over 2. Plus or minus 3, plus or minus 3 over 2, plus or minus 2, and 2 over 2 is 1, so that's going to be covered here, plus or minus 1, and plus or minus 1/2. Oh boy, we're in trouble, right? Now the reality is I am not going to have you do all of this work. Plus or minus 1. So what I'd like, 1/2. So what I'd like you to do is, if you had a graphing calculator, I would ask you to use your graphing calculator by plugging in these values into your graphing calculator. That's a very specific skill. But if you don't have a graphing calculator to do it, I'm going to ask you to go to Desmos. After you've listed all this stuff out, go to Desmos and figure out which one's going to work. And so you do that by literally graphing it. So let's do that together. So heading over to Desmos, here we are, we see that we have some values, and I'm going to use these values to help myself out. So when I click on this value here, I see that 5 is a 0, which is going to be cool, and then I see 1.5 is a 0. And if we go back to our work, we see that both of those were there, 5 and 1.5, and they're both positive. So we're going to use those to get all of the zeros, okay? And we can see that the fact that we only had 2 zeros, 5 and 1.5. Where's 1.5? 3 over 2. So we're going to use both of those. The fact that we only saw 2 zeros meant that the other ones are imaginary, and we've got to figure out what they are. So how do we do it? We're going to do synthetic division like this. We're going to drop our 2 down, get 10, drop our 13, and that 10 gives me a negative 3, negative 15 here. Adding those up together, I get an 8, I get a 40, and then when I add these two together, I get a negative 12, and then I get a negative 60. Nice relief. You're like, cool, it works. And then so from this, I have a reduced equation. You know that this is like 2x to the third power minus 3x squared plus 8x minus 12. But I'm not even going to do that. That's why I did it all ghostly gray. I'm just going to go back and synthetically divide out again. And so when I do that, I am going to take my 3 over 2. I know we don't usually do fractions here, but we can do it. We're tough. Drop the 2 down. 3 over 2 times 2. The 2's cancel, and I'm left with 3, and I already have a 0. 3 over 2 times 0 is 0. 8 minus 0 is 8. 3 over 2 times 8. Well, the 2 goes into the 8 4 times. 4 times 3 is 12. And there we go. So now here I have this reduced fraction. And so, no, I guess reduced fraction, not reduced fraction, sorry, that's not the word, reduced or depressed equation. So this was x cubed. This is now going to be x squared. Um, the zero is negligible, and then I have a constant here. So my equation is going to look like this. 2x squared, why am I in this wrong color? Okay, 2x squared plus 8, right, is a factor. We got the other two factors, remember, x minus 5, that was for the 5, and then x minus 3 over 2 in a way, right? Or we could look at this as 3x minus 2 because that would give us the 3 over 2. However, right now our concern is about this, this part here. So 2x squared plus 8, we're going to set it equal to 0. We know we're getting imaginary numbers, right, from our graph. So we're going to move that 8 over to the other side, and we get that 2x squared is equal to negative 8. Dividing both sides by 2, we see that x squared is equal to a negative 4. You know how to get out of this debacle. We're going to take the square root of both sides, and we get that x is equal to plus or minus the square root of negative 4. The square root of negative 4 can be written as 2i, I taking care of that negative, and 2 being the square root of 4. And so my answer is plus or minus 2i. Well, my answer for that. My answer for the whole problem is that the zeros are at 5, positive 3 halves. That's just not even making sense. Let's write it again. Positive 3 halves and plus or minus 2i. And so I get 4 roots, which I expected, and there they are. I'll highlight them in yellow so they look awesome. Or orange. Let's do that. And then so now that we see our answer, I'm going to stop talking, and this is the end of the video, and this is all we need to do to be able to work it out. So even on your test or even on your assessment or your homework, I want to see the list of all of these possible zeros, but the reality is when there's like 500 of them, okay, exaggeration, but when there's so many of them, it's a lot of work to be going through it, and it would be really sad for you to start and just get so fatigued. So I would rather you recognize the rule, see its usefulness, go online, graph it, or if you've got a graphing calculator, graph it. Make sure you see the zeros, use those to reduce and get your depressed equation, and go ahead and put them in. All right? Listen, I will talk to you later. Let me know if you have any questions or concerns. Take care. Bye-bye.